of the rope is 400 feet, or 120 meters, the same depth the Niagara lies at.
There's a massive mental challenge to it because of the depth that's involved.
The key to freediving is breath holding.
It doesn't seem to be anything other than slightly slow, deep breathing, but there's different things that I'm doing with my diaphragm.
Tanya has trained herself to swallow air into lungs which are already full of air. Like the Niagara divers, Tanya needs to begin her challenge with a series of build-up dives. Her first dive is to 100 feet, or 30 meters, in a sheltered inlet at the Poor Knights Islands. As this is relatively shallow, Pete, Dave and Tim will observe from the surface.
It's been over 3 years since I did my record, and that was the last time I did any sled diving.
Freediving has different categories. In a no-limits dive, the weighted sled on a line pulls the diver down, and an inflating balloon assists the ascent. This is the deepest form of freediving.
Rope on the top. Yep. Out.
The first job is to position the 160-pound ballast which holds the sled line vertical.
The cold, I would say, is personally my greatest fear. Oh, zips in my suit. Got myself into a terrible state. I would try and sit and imagine what is it going to be like to be in 15 or 16 degrees.
Tanya and Paul do a visual check to ensure the sled line is correctly placed. When humans hold their breath and descend in cold water, their bodies respond with what's called the dive reflex. It's the same response seals have when they dive deep looking for food.
I start doing that breathing and I can feel my heart rate slow down.
Before descending, Tanya sucks the full capacity of air into her lungs. This is all she has to keep her alive till she surfaces.
I can feel different sensations. I can feel the blood shift, the blood move away from my extremities. I can feel a sensation of cold go across my face, and sometimes also a taste of metal in my mouth.
As she descends, the dive reflex kicks in. Her heart rate lowers to around 12 to 15 beats per minute. Blood flow shifts from the extremities to the central organs. Her lungs are crushed until they cannot compress any further. Blood and other fluids are forced into her chest cavity where the lungs would normally sit. Her brain, heart and lungs receive priority for the body's precious remaining oxygen. There's considerable pain as the eardrums feel about to burst.
I've encountered pain in my eardrums, especially with sled diving, because of the extremity of the depth.
Freediving, to me, the uninitiated, appears pretty reckless. It stuns me that somebody can get to these depths without any equipment whatsoever, other than a wetsuit.
As Tanya nears the surface, she lets go of the sled and swims up the final 60 feet. There's a huge pressure shift in that final distance. Her lungs suddenly expand back to normal size and suck oxygen from her blood. The danger is that she could black out. She has to kick slowly to the surface to prevent this happening. Tanya successfully completes her first no-limit sled dive in over 3 years. She has only 5 more days to achieve her goal of 325 feet or 100 meters.
O2 goes in first, of course.
The next day, it's time to mix the gases the dive team will use on both Tanya's dive and the Niagara.
That's a Greek.
Precise percentages of oxygen, helium and nitrogen must be blended together to produce trimix.
6.8, 6.97, 6.9. What are you after? 7.
This is a tense procedure. Misjudging the gas mixture by as little as 1% would be enough to cause it to become poisonous. If there was a mistake with too much oxygen being added, the result underwater could cause a lethal condition known as central nervous system toxicity. The diver could suffer an epileptic-like seizure. They'll be in the water for up to 5 hours decompressing and will require different mixes at different depths. On each deep dive, they'll consume up to 5 tanks per diver. It's time for Tanya's first build-up dive, using the trimix divers for the first time. She's attempting 85 meters, or 276 feet.
If we're doing a dive and I'm at anything at 80 meters or above, I'm not going to need your assistance unless I am blacked out. It's really unlikely that anything's going to happen.
On this dive, Tanya will be underwater for approximately 1.5 minutes. The trimix divers will be down for over 2 hours. It only takes 4 minutes for Pete, Dave and Tim to get to the deepest position. But on the way up, they have to stop at 6 different depths to decompress. This is to dissipate the dangerous nitrogen levels which have built up in their blood. Because Tanya is deep for such a short period of time on just 1 lungful of air, nitrogen doesn't have a chance to build up in her blood, so she doesn't have to decompress. The two methods of diving deep couldn't be more starkly contrasted.
I know what it's like to be at 100 metres and I can't comprehend being there without any equipment.
Out at the dive site, the swell is coming up. The dive boat has to be positioned in the lee of one of the Poor Knights Islands. The trimix divers kit up and wait. Tanya is still terrified of the cold water. Its effect on her physiology at this depth is still an unknown factor. She warms up with a hot water hose.
5 minutes!
In the last minutes before the dive, the sled boat is drifting dangerously close to the island. The chase boat tows it away.
You need to get whatever boat that is getting the fumes.
Diesel fumes are irritating her lungs. As Tanya descends, what she doesn't know is that the sled line has drifted onto a shallower rock ledge. She realizes something is amiss and stops the sled prematurely at 230 feet. Distracted, she finds she can't release the lift bag to take her to the surface. For 17 seconds, she frantically wrestles with the mechanism. One of the safety divers swims up from below to assist. But she's made her decision. She has to kick 230 feet to the surface after already being submerged for over a minute.
It's really unlikely that anything's going to happen.
As she surfaces, the unthinkable happens. She experiences shallow water blackout. Her lungs have expanded too quickly, sucking all the oxygen from her blood. She has pushed herself beyond her limit.
I did indeed.
Just watch out because it might come hurtling up now. Fighting with the lift bag to get it undone. I couldn't get the release to work. I was pulling and pulling and pulling and push the sled up and pulling and pulling.
What I didn't consider wholly is the time I spent at the bottom, the effort that I put in to trying to release that clip, which was quite considerable, and that was a mistake. It's given me a massive mental barrier. I've never had a blackout in that situation. I think I realised my own vulnerability very much. I overlooked to tell the divers that that was a situation where you call the dive. That was entirely my fault. I think I pulled with my left hand. I pulled left because I don't think I can pull and do the thing with the same hand. We've all learned from it, but it was potentially an extremely dangerous situation, and not just for me. I'm just going to grab that and gently yank it.
Look at
that.
Anyway.
That's amazing. Really don't need to yank it as hard as I was then.
Tanya and Paul review their preparations.
Wow, that is just positively in the right place, isn't it?
Yeah,
It doesn't get any better than that.
During Tanya's dives, the image of the Niagara has never been far from Pete, Dave and Tim's minds. Now, it's their turn. The day begins with a problem. Pete discovers a hole in the exhalation bag of his rebreather.
But my redundant bag's got a tear in it. I had a bit of a prick of a morning, but we've sorted it out. And a lot of people are willing to drop everything and help out, which is just amazing. We're back in.
With Tanya's blackout still on their minds, the divers are all on edge.
You've got a sort of healthy dose of apprehension, just thinking over and over in your mind what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. Have you got all the little things in the right place? It's a mental rehearsal time, basically.
Russell Radio, Real Passion.
Real Passion here, good morning.
Top of the morning, dear Richie.
No, I'd certainly believe a lot of it is psychological, and if you visualise the whole dive from start to finish as going well, 99% of the time the problems don't arise.
Revisiting the Niagara is a moment Dave and Tim have both dreamt about since their first experience. For Pete, who missed out last time, this is a defining moment. The divers will be underwater for nearly 5 hours. They have to take water bottles to keep from dehydrating. They also wear diapers inside their dry suits, as their bladders won't last. The descent to the wreck will take 10 minutes, and they'll spend 25 minutes exploring the Niagara. The rest of the time will be spent decompressing. The camera equipment is especially modified to withstand the extreme pressure. The team will also be backed up by a remote camera operated from the dive boat.
The current is pulling me away from that rope.
Light will always be the limiting factor. To floodlight the huge wreck would take a budget of titanic proportions. The shot line is placed over the wreck and the team is towed by the chase boat to their point of departure.
I just can't wait. Get down that line.
At 10 minutes past 11, the team descends.
It's the Star Trek syndrome, to go where no one's gone before. You just don't know what's there until you go there.
It's an unforgiving world down there. If you can't get yourself out of trouble, you can't expect somebody else to get you out of trouble.
In just over 8 minutes, it's pitch black down here. The divers' lights illuminate the first glimpse of the ship they've been preparing to see for so long.
Just gets darker and darker. Then you see the wreck laid out below you. It's a magnificent ship.
She lies on her port side, her decks near vertical. There's a gaping hole in her hull where explosives blasted her open back in 1941 to retrieve the gold bars. The Trimix divers have placed their shot line so they can explore the area around the bridge at the front of the ship. At nearly 400 feet, the helium in the gas mixture helps keep their minds clear. It's reducing the narcotic effect of the nitrogen which is building up in their bloodstream. Helium does have a side effect.
And I see Dave and Tim just talking to each other madly away there, and it was like the chipmunks revisited.
The divers have spent so much time studying plans, they know exactly where they are on the wreck.
The biggest thing is getting inside the wreck and getting into the third-class cabins up the bow there. You recognise stuff, but I suppose that fan, that's something a bit more personal. One fan there for one person, and yeah, you're sort of swimming through someone's bedroom.
There are still gold bars on the Niagara. Not all of them were recovered in 1941. The location of the remainder is not known, but this is a filming expedition, not a salvage operation. The only treasure found today is a teacup. It will later be catalogued and archived.
Try and get in there somewhere and position ourselves.
On the surface, the remote camera follows every step of the exploration. He could easily lose them on such a huge wreck. Time on the wreck has run out. If they stayed on the bottom one more minute, the penalty would be another 13 minutes on their already 5-hour decompression. The divers take one last look at the Niagara.
At the end of the dive, I think the biggest thing is extreme joy.
Now begins the most dangerous part of the dive, the ascent.
Any idiot can descend down to a 100-meter wreck, but it's getting yourself back onto the surface safely that takes the skill.
At the surface, the safety team is anxious. The divers reach the first decompression stop at 276 feet. They've been underwater for 36 minutes. They won't surface for another 4 hours. They send the first signal to the surface.
Got the slate? All okay. 3 divers okay.
The divers will stop 20 more times at specific depth points on their ascent. They begin to